Welcome everyone to this event celebrating holding space, life and love through a queer lens with Ryan Pfluger. My name's My name is Greg Newton. I, along with my partner Don Jokum, am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which you should really find yourself in. Thank you, thank you. The short explanation for our long name is that we are a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And this is the service we provide. So we hold this space for queer books and queer culture. We always have changing exhibitions. Right now we have Catalina Schlubener-Munoz's Satanic Panic, which I'm very happy to have here. And we'll be doing a book launch for Kata's catalog of the whole Satanic Panic series on February 3rd, I believe it is. So if you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the register and you will get an email every other Monday about our many upcoming events. So the Bureau is an all-volunteer organization that Donnie and I founded, and we survive in this harsh capitalist environment by selling books and taking donations and assistance from volunteers. So we do have a suggested donation of $10. I'm going to pass a bag around, but just give what you can. And if you'd rather buy a book to support us, that is a wonderful way to support us. Adam also has a book, which is here. So he'll be plugging that later, and I'll be reading that
right here.
Yeah. So yeah. Buying books is a great way to support us as well if you prefer to do that instead of a donation. But I'll pass that around. There's change in the bag. Also, you can give on Venmo at BGSPD, which surrounds you. Those letters surround you everywhere you look in this. So I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists, and then we're going to jump in and get started. So Ryan Pfluger is an artist and photographer whose work has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, Time, Rolling Stone, and elsewhere. Ryan lives in Los Angeles, California with their dog, Sarah Connor. Born and raised in New York, they received an MFA in photography at the School of Visual Arts. Adam Eli is a community organizer and writer in New York City. He is the founder of Voices For, a nonviolent direct action activist group committed to advancing global queer liberation, and was included in Out Magazine's 100 Most Influential Queer People of 2018. His first book, The New Queer Conscience, right over here, was published in 2020. He believes that when you mess with one queer, you mess with us all. I like that. Let's keep that true. Leo Xander Fu is a photographer based in New York City, born in 2003. He is a non-binary trans man of Chinese and Peruvian descent from Staten Island, New York. Leo is currently an undergraduate at the School of Visual Arts in NYC, majoring in BFA photography and video. Leo's work revolves around voracious yet intimately queer portraiture, creating space for his subjects to express themselves while also playing with a fluid lexicon of passion and identity. Please welcome them all, and let's start.
Okay, really thank you everyone for coming. We're so excited to be here and to celebrate Ryan's book. Those were such beautiful introductions. It kind of negate my first two questions, but I will still say that, Ryan, if you could just, you had a beautiful introduction, but maybe introduce yourself just a little bit and tell us a little bit about the project that we are here celebrating tonight.
So, hey everyone. So yeah, my name is Ryan, and I'm not going to give like my photo history. It's irrelevant. This book is kind of like, I feel like, a new chapter of my life. I started holding space in like end of April, beginning of May of 2020. I was trying to figure out what I could do during the pandemic that felt like it was a real kind of statement of who I was as an artist, because I finally had the time to do that. I had spent pretty much the last decade just being a working photographer, still making personal work, but it was never really a priority, or it actually couldn't be a priority financially. And I felt like I finally had the time to do that. So the project had been something I had been thinking about for about a decade. And I actually really wasn't sure what the context of it would be. I know we'll talk about it in a bit, but the whole thing was I wanted to talk about intersectionality through photography. And I didn't know how that would look. I didn't know what the textual components of that would be. But I felt that it was something that was kind of lacking within photography. And so I just started with a few close couples that I was friends with that were interracial and that I knew would be willing to kind of have conversations with me. And none of that was recorded. I didn't want it to feel like I was being intrusive. It was a very casual experience. It was basically me workshopping whether this would be a body of work that would work. And kind of after the first shoot and seeing the images, I was like, there's something really here that like visually I haven't seen in culture, and I wanted to explore that more. And so fast forward 2 years later, but it was a very long process of only photographing strangers. And I had been doing it for about a year when my lovely editor, Holly, is here.
Round of applause for Holly.
Reached out to me. A few smaller presses had reached out to me previously, and I was familiar with Holly's work as an editor, and I was very excited that she had reached out to me. And after a few conversations, kind of the birth of the book happened. And then all of the work that I did in about a year, I had to double that in about 6 months. So it was a very quick, quick rest of the book actually.
Wow. Okay, and we're gonna come back. I didn't know that, and we're gonna come back to that, especially the intersectional part in a second. But Leo, our brilliant Leo. Leo, will you tell us a little bit about your practice and also about how you Ryan?
Yeah, so I just been taking photos as just something that's a part of me for ever since I could, I think. And yeah, and it's I've been really using it as a tool to explore myself and the world around me, and using it as a practice of healing, I think, has really helped me a lot, and is some of my favorite work that I made regarding self-portraits and just connecting with people for sure has been pretty significant in the work. And knowing Ryan, I think I just followed you for a long time on Instagram. This is our first time meeting in person. Yeah, I've just always loved your work, and I think we make photos for similar reasons. So I think that's why I'm definitely drawn to what you do.
I'm gonna go off script here for a second and say, just because what you said, Ryan, a quote that I didn't use, which we're now going to use, is that in your introduction you wrote that photography has become a vessel of healing, and that's something that you mentioned also, Leo. Maybe could you speak to that line just a little bit?
Yeah, my master's thesis was on how photography is therapy. For me, it's always been, I'm a really introverted person. I don't like crowds. I don't like, big social engagements. It's always been kind of difficult for me to form community because of my kind of isolated nature of myself. And so photography became this way for me to interact with people a lot easier. It's funny how just having a contraption in front of you really changes the way that you interact with people. I'm much more secure in myself and in my practice, so it allows me to listen and communicate in ways that I probably don't do as well without it. And it also became a way for me to form my own community by just the people that I photographed. And pretty much since then, which was about 15 years ago, I mostly photograph strangers through social media, the internet, friends. I don't photograph people that are close to me. And then after I photograph them, then I do come close to them, I stop photographing.
Got it. And so, Leo, as someone who is younger than everyone here, is what Ryan express, is that something that you can identify with?
Yeah, like almost word for word. I'm also very introverted, and I've always had like really bad social anxiety, and I still do. And I figured out that if I want to make photos, and like I've always felt like I wanted to do that, then I'm gonna have to meet people and talk to them, and like that's really just like helped me just I guess like function socially, and yeah, like inform community and meet people. Like I've
That's how we met.
yeah, yeah, like I'm pretty sure like everyone I know is through my photography, which is pretty.
That's a beautiful connection between the two of you. And now we're gonna hop back on script and get sort of into the meat of it, which is that this is a photo book of interracial queer couples. And in your introduction, you speak very eloquently about the reasons you chose to do that, and you talk about Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who is credited with coining the term intersectionality in the 90s. I was wondering if you could just walk us through, the definition of intersectionality and how that relates to your practice, and especially this book.
Yeah, I mean the easiest way to describe it is just that like all of the social constructs, everything from gender, race, sexuality, are all impactful into how we interact with the world, how people are treated. It's just kind of this layering of all the things that exist within us as humans, and it's very complicated. And so for me, again, it was like me figuring out how do I work that into the visual, and what as a white person, like how do I kind of relinquish myself into creating. And that also led to the reason why the text is an interview style. When it comes to the actual photographs in the book, all of the couples had final say on what represented them. So I think that even just using that framework of intersectionality, I was very mindful of like my place as a white person and wanting to make sure that I wasn't controlling it in any way, and that I was fully a facilitator rather than a director per se, in how people presented themselves, what information they gave to the readers. And I think by the quantity is what makes it really talk about intersectionality, because it really, you would think that it's just dealing with gender and sexuality, but it actually ends up dealing with socioeconomics, religion, kind of all these things that queer people have to face on top of just being a queer person. And that's again the framework of intersectionality of like how things kind of layer on top of each other, and how that impacts a person and how they have to navigate their life. And so I knew that it needed to be a large quantity in order to really facilitate that properly.
That's beautiful. It makes so much sense. And one of the things that I love that you did is that we have another photographer here, Hunter Abrams, right in the front row. And something you did in this book, which I think is really unique in Ontario, and you can speak to it. It's not the normal practice, which is that people were allowed to, like, if you shot them for the project, if someone broke up or they just didn't like the photos or didn't want to be in it anymore, the subject could just change their mind, which is really not.
It's literally not.
That is like not how a magazine or whatever it is, or like an artist 20 years ago, they own that image forever, do whatever they want. So Ryan, you wrote something in the book that I think is so beautiful that I'm going to read, and then we'll both talk about it, which is that, so this is Ryan in the introduction. The language we often use to describe photography can be violent and objectifying. The male gaze, the taking of someone's portrait, or having a photo shoot, the directing of subjects. We intellectualize and celebrate a photographer's work and intentions while maintaining assumptions and fetishizing those depicted in a singular frozen moment of time. There's rarely a subject statement. Instead, we get an artist statement. When I started this body of work, I knew it couldn't exist under this framework. So Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about the thought behind that, and also how you were able to negate or avoid that framework, especially in the book? Like, how did you rewrite that gaze?
Yeah, I'll start it off with a caveat of, I don't know if I would. But I do think that it has completely changed how I look at photography. So yeah, I knew just for myself, as a queer person, as a non-binary person, that like I often feel that the narrative of queer people is often told, at least in the popular culture, by non-queer people, or the representation of it is not as, I hate using the word authentic, but it's not as authentic as it should be. And it also is not really giving power back in any way. And so I knew for this that I really wanted it to be able to exist without me. I wanted for I say collaborators instead of subjects. I wanted for them to feel like it was equal footing, that it wasn't, especially dealing with intimacy and relationships and knowing, photographers that I love and that I love. I so often think like about the subjects in the photographs and like what if this was like a misconstrued piece of time. Because there is so much power in taking just a moment from someone and then using it for your own artistic needs. And so it was really figuring out like logistically whether I could not use releases, allow everyone to have control over their images, allow people to bow out at any point, not knowing whether I'd even have a book in the end. And I think because of what the subject matter was, that's why so many people stuck with it, even couples that did break up that wanted to talk about it, because it was just as important in the conversation of how relationships evolve, how they change, and like also why they end. Which I think, for me, I never had any sort of guidelines to like look at when I was younger, or things that where I could be like, oh, like I see myself in that. And like, it's not just about like who I'm attracted to. It's like how we love each other, and how we work through all of the trauma to love another person. And like, I wanted to hear people talk, but I also didn't want to force people into talking about what I wanted to talk about. Because a lot of couples revealed a lot of stuff to me intimately in the moment, but then when it came to their text, it wasn't as personal as I thought that it would be. And some couples I knew I could push further, some I knew I couldn't. There was a lot that just kind of ghosted me, and after photographing it, and it came to a point of me being like, that's actually what this is all about, and it didn't bother me. Where it was like, I still was able to have that moment then, and that was important, whether it's part of a publication didn't really matter to me. And luckily in the end, it was, a lot, 100 couples, even though I photographed about 125. And, now that the book is out, it's interesting because there's about 10 to 12 that talk about their breakups or relationships evolving. There's probably about 50 or 60 of them that are no longer together, and that have fully bought the book for their families and like still are talking about it because it was about that moment, and also it's a real honoring of what that relationship was. Even
That's so beautifully said, and I think that here in these hallowed halls of the LGBT Center and surrounded by all these beautiful queer books, especially that type of generosity and kindness and non-offensive gaze is not, if you look at queer photography and like history of queer photography, many of the books are here. A lot of that is missed, and I'm not going to name names, but some of our most famous queer photographers definitely had issues with boundaries and people being objectified, and the idea of queer people being photographed by non-queer people. So I think that takes even greater resonance.
I mean, with that said, I think that also, adds, where people were fighting to be seen historically. And so it was always a matter of like, what is going to get people to pay attention to me? What's going to make people interested in this culture? And for me, it was like, I want this to be just for queer people. But the beauty of it is that like what they speak on and like what is depicted is very relatable for anyone. And I think that that's something that like for a lot of people like does not compute, where it's like, how can queer love be, you know, equated to say like, you know, a heterosexual couple or like a not interracial couple? And it's like, we forget we're all human. It's like we're all experiencing all these emotions, and it just happens that like we may have a lot more baggage, and so it's like we have different tool sets than other people do. And I really wanted to showcase that, which is also why I removed myself, because I wanted as many experiences talked about as possible, and not so much about what my experience is. Because, you know, one of the first questions that people ask me with this book is, are you in an interracial couple? And it's like that, I think just by reading and looking at the book, you know that I've been in one. But whether or not that is relevant to body work itself, it's really not, because this work in itself is not about.
Yeah, and beautifully said, and I'm gonna go off script again, sorry Leo, for you. But I was reading some interviews with you today, and one of your big breaks was photographing the world-renowned and truly iconic artist Arca. And I'm wondering if you can identify with any of what Ryan's saying about like the truly collaborative nature with your not subject, what's the word? Collaborator, especially as it pertains to that photo shoot, which it sounds like really changed your life and career.
Yeah, with her, like that was pretty amazing, because she's definitely an artist that has influenced not just my work, but who I am as a person. And that is just very gratifying. It was just so easy to work with her, because I feel like sometimes you could just work with someone and everything just happens perfectly without really much, like a lot of things go unsaid, and it's just like it just works with like the connection. So that was super nice working with her. But regarding also like other people I photographed and maintaining like an equal footing, because I photograph myself a lot, and I've also been photographed, that I know what feels, what may feel like too much of one perspective. So I try to make sure that it's always a conversation when I'm working with people photographing, because one of the biggest things that bothers me is like not being understood or perceived in a way that feels true or right to myself. So I want to make sure when I'm photographing people that they are being represented like they want to. And it's like, it's so rewarding when someone tells me that after like the way I photograph them is very accurate in how they want to be seen and truly captured. So yeah.
Beautifully said. I have another two hard hitting questions and then some lighter ones, and then we'll do some Q&A. How are we doing this time? Perfect. Good. Okay. Ryan, something else that you said in the book that really moved me was, you said, this is Ryan speaking, part of the reason I became a photographer was to gain some semblance of control over a life that always seemed to ebb and flow based exclusively on the decisions of others. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that idea a little.
Yeah, I mean, my true photography practice, I think, started with my thesis in grad school, where I photographed my father. And the reasoning behind that was that I didn't have a relationship with him, but I felt like my life had been controlled by both my parents were adults. And so it felt like I was constantly at the whim of like what their issues were, and never could really gain any semblance of like what my activity was, because it was so much putting out fires for other people, which queer people are really good at. And, you know, I think that from a young age, I didn't feel like people were looking at me and understanding me. And I thought the best way to go about that was through photography. It became a way for people to see how I see the world and to have a better understanding of what was going on in my brain. And so it became this kind of mechanism of controlling like who it was that I was interacting with. And like even with my work practice, it's like choosing who it is that I'm photographing. It like gave that power dynamic back to me a bit in a way that felt really exciting as an artist. And that's why this book became so interesting, because it was like figuring out how to use that, you know, power of like people respecting my craft, and then kind of just giving it back to my community, for people to see how I see others, but most importantly for the people that collaborated with me, for them to be seen how they wanted to be seen, just basically through my eyes, which, you know, was a daunting process. You know, it's like the way I think someone looks beautiful or a couple looks beautiful or is intriguing may not be how they feel about themselves. And it's like taking into account, you know, even just power dynamics in relationships where one partner feels like maybe they're not as, you know, paid attention to as the other. And if they were more prominent in a photograph than the other was, and like what triggered them with that. And so it was going through a lot of process with all of them once we started actually getting lay out.
Got it. And that, Leo, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of your work, the first work of yours that I became familiar with was your self-portraiture. And does that semblance of control over image, does that play a role in your self-portraiture, or is it stand in that?
I feel like I started photographing myself sort of as a tool to, as like a practice of self-love, I think. Yeah, I mean, I've also been like isolated growing up, so I think I really only have myself to work with. So that's how it started, and then it just became also a vessel to just communicate myself, because I felt like I couldn't really do that anywhere else. So I did it through making photos. Yeah, and it is my favorite work to make still, I think, just because it's like also that aspect of control, just like what I look like and how I am perceived, and like specifically having aspects that get the point across of what I said.
Got it. Okay, so this is my last question for the two of you, and then we'll open up to Q&A, which is, what other queer photographers should we be following or supporting? Any favorites or any other queer photography books that we should be purchasing here? Anyone you want to like shout out? Like, tell us, cool kids. What should we know? Yeah, exactly.
Now it's on.
Yeah. we're all buying stuff. What else should we buy?
And there's two in this room. It's here, who's amazing.
I'm sure it's your hand.
I also personally very much appreciate queer people that maybe their work necessarily doesn't be as queer, because I think that there's this assumption that if you are a queer person, your work needs to be about identity, and that's not true at all. And sometimes it doesn't, it overlaps, sometimes it doesn't. And Michael George, who lives the life that in another world I wish that I lived, an amazing photographer.
What life is that?
The one where I get to go to Antarctica.
Oh wow.
And Eric Carter, who is one of my closest friends, who's a brilliant photographer, and I don't say that lightly. Does just an amazing work just about the Black queer experience, and also it's an amazing work photographer. And I'm sure he will have a book any day.
Wonderful, wonderful. Leo, anyone we should be following?
Yeah, one photographer I really have been liking for the past year or two is Rami Ahmed. I go to school with him, and he's made a lot of work about the Black trans liberation marches and the Stonewall protests, and I just really love the work he's making. And I think recently some of his work is in a book as well.
From Aperture.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Liberation is love.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Thank you all so much, I think, for talking with me. I think we have time for like 2 questions. If you don't have them, that's okay. But if you do, that'd be great. And then we'll hang out for a little bit here. You'll be signing books.
Yes,
I
so
believe.
it's like, anyone else?
Any questions, gays?
I was kind of I thought a little bit, but I was wondering generally what your thoughts are on in the world of photography, both with like having to have, if you're queer, feeling like you have to have your art be about identity, and just like in general feeling like you have to have some sort of like emotional porn interjected into your work. Like I also went to school, and so much of it is like, what does it mean? What is it about? What does it mean to you? And sometimes you just make work because that's cathartic to you. And like that could be meaning with itself, but they wanted to be like, but your dead mom or something. And so like I just wanted to know what your thoughts.
Yeah,
that influenced this.
Should I repeat to
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
gonna pick that up?
I don't know. Yeah, that would be great if you.
No, I'm gonna put it in the mic so that way,
Yeah, sure.
and let me know if I'm getting it wrong. Which the question, the wonderful question, was about identity, and whether in the world of photography, if you, the pressure to make work about your identity, and also the pressure to make like emotional porn work that necessarily speaks to like some greater idea, as opposed to making something that might be just more cathartic and personal to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this body of work is like fully a response to that. I think that it's rare also to just see a monograph with so much text. And I really felt that it, depending on it, if I took, full control of this and there wasn't text, it really could have been that. It really, there's a lot more intimate images that are not in this book. And I think that for me, it's kind of now finding that happy medium where it's like, I don't want everything to be trauma porn, and I don't want everything to be about my identity, because my identity is what it is, and it's going to inform everything that I do regardless. I say that as just a working photographer, but like as a queer person, me being in the room automatically changes the room. And I think that for me, I also kind of want to change. I want to change how people look at photo books. I wanted there to be a real accessibility to this, where it isn't so much about the intellectualizing of photography and much more about the broadness of humanity, which is a difficult thing to try to put into a 200-page book. But I think I say very much this is like the first chapter of kind of what I feel like I've embarked on as an artist now, because I don't think it needs to. It doesn't need to be about our trauma to be interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm currently in photo school too, and I definitely feel that pressure. And I have been more recently with like coming out as trans and everything, and like publicly documenting that. But like I'm not gonna go to photo school anymore, because I feel like that is like really that pressure is like sort of not. It's like pushing my work in a way that I don't want it to be. So I'm like, I need to get out of an environment like that. So, but yeah, and that, like, it's like annoying having to like explain yourself when like you don't really want to always. And I'm just like a lot of my self-portraits, I feel like I do it because like either feel good or I feel bad, and I use it as like to amplify like just how I feel in that moment, and not really so much saying like it's like a political statement they want, where like I'm like tired of like my existence, like trying to be like political. It's like I'm just like making stuff because I want to.
As you should.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Or not. Okay, well, oh, yeah. That's my word.
Was wondering if in kind of approaching this photographer subject relationship in this kind of radical way in which you really allowed them into the process of kind of editing all these different aspects of the way that the image was created and evolved. I was wondering if that has changed the way you would take photographs in the future. And when you said that you wouldn't necessarily do it the same way, I'm sure that there's still sort of all of these methodologies that have kind of come from this that you would be incorporating. And I'm just wondering sort of what that looks like how does this become a part of your practice going forward?
Yeah, I think that, as we say, consent is everything. And I think that just because someone consents to being photographed, it doesn't necessarily mean that they consent to how their personhood is depicted to the world. And I've always been mindful of that. And I think this really made me kind of understand the why behind it, and now wanting to make sure that the people that become a part of my community of my work, that they are just as on board with what I am doing as I am when it comes to the final product of what I show to the world. Whether it would be as kind of like as much veto power as it was, maybe not. But again, that's something that I'm still kind of thinking about, because it is something that's very counterintuitive to what like an artistic practice is. But for me, my work so much is about collaboration that it's just figuring out the right place for it.
I think it's a beautiful note to end on. Let's give a big hand to these amazing notes.
Photography. Great. Thank you all. Thanks everyone who joined us online.